breaking news over the last 24 hours or so is that Jordan Larmour is out for 10 weeks with a dislocated shoulder. Alan, I think you know a thing or two about dislocated shoulders.
Yeah, I do, unfortunately. I'm not sure if it's 100% confirmed yet, but it's a tough injury to get. Unlucky, lots of rugby players get him. I feel sorry for him because he's someone who would have been vitally important in the next period of time for Andy Farrell and the Irish team. So it's a disappointing one and very frustrating for him personally, and he'll be a big loss to Ireland.
It is a stage of his career where he's just about nailing down a regularity in terms of a nailed-on position with Leinster, and it seemed like a nailed-on position with Ireland, and where you kind of get the benefit of that first 15 caps where suddenly you're not looking over your shoulder the whole time and you begin to fully understand what the match day rhythm is like and what the ratcheted up pressure and intensity are actually like at international level as well.
Yeah, he's matured a lot. I think he flew onto the scene a couple of years ago, and his ability to play is just phenomenal. His footwork, his pace, his general skill. The question marks, I suppose, were, and it happens for any fullback, is how you cope under the high ball. That's where most of the scrutiny comes from. And I think in recent weeks he's been put on the wing, and Hugo Quinlan has played at fullback. So Stockdale is playing fullback for Ulster. So they're kind of interesting things that are happening. But Jordan Larmour is a fantastic player with just natural ability and an ability to find a gap. We probably haven't seen as much of him in open space or getting as much ball since the lockdown came back. But he's someone who's matured a lot. He's still very, very young and has played so much rugby in the last couple of years. That's such a natural talent, and it's tough for him. Dealing with these injuries are part and parcel of the game. Sometimes players don't ever get those kind of serious ones, but unfortunately it's part and parcel of it. I had plenty of them myself, and he's going to have to try and, probably not sure yet whether he gets surgery or not, or how they address the issue, but he's going to be out for a while, and it's a big blow. But look, it's part and parcel of it, as I said.
He was name-checked as well by Warren Gatland as one of those players who he would be interested in from a Lions perspective. So there's a lot on the line. It's a really important time for him to try and not rush back, but at the same time to come back ready to go.
Yeah, look, and he's someone that would definitely come into contention for the Lions. Lions always depends on how the Six Nations go, the previous, just before the tour, but it might be a blessing in disguise. He get a bit of a break now, and he's a lot of rugby played in the last few years, and would come back and be in contention. So you can't rush these things. The modern surgery and science around the injuries and the recovery times are way quicker nowadays. So you're looking at four to 6 months for a dislocated shoulder if you get the surgery. So it depends. I'm not really sure where the 10 weeks come out of, because if he has to get surgery, it's going to be much longer than 10 weeks. So
that's just what the Independent are reporting that this morning. So maybe they're hoping that it won't be surgery.
Yeah, well, if it's not surgery, sometimes the shoulder pops out and it goes back in, and it heals and you rehab. But usually to strengthen it up, the decision for the player is, you don't want, in an ideal world, you don't want players who have a shoulder dislocation, getting them put back in and strapping it up and hoping that it'll heal. Unless that's the doctor's advice, it can happen, but it's probably more likely that there'll be surgery needed, and that's a 4 to 6 month job.
Let's talk about Munster at the weekend. Again, I think people are very excited. It's obviously the best part about being a sports fan, and we talked about it last week, the excitement of seeing new players come through. The more game time they're getting, the more excited people are getting.
Yeah, and you gauge the perception of the public and what the fans are thinking more than ever now that there's no fans at matches. More people are vocal online and social media and stuff like that. And probably reading comments online, people were saying it was a poor performance and it was frustrated. And during the game, I think I skim in and out of it during the game, and there was lots of mistakes and errors and probably frustration for people watching. But putting it in context, I think that was a very, very strong Edinburgh side, full international side practically. The Scottish pack probably were playing. Most of those guys, all of the Scottish pack were were playing against Munster. So it was a very good win in the end. They showed a lot of character, and a lot of positives can be taken out of that. But obviously, they look at the finer details and the turnovers and the mistakes and a few inaccurate kicks again. I think there's a huge amount of scrutiny on the kicking, and people, again, it's perception. Because if you look at the stats, the previous weekend in the Pro 14, Munster kicked the least amount out of the 4 provinces in the Pro 14 the previous weekend. But it's, if you've 1 or 2 really bad kicks or kicks that you shouldn't do, going back to, the kick inside the 22 against the Scarlets by Craig Casey, they're the ones people remember. So bad kicks get more focus, and there was a couple the other night again, but look, they tried to play. I thought, they're missing a lot of the frontliners the other night, and a lot of young players stepped up, and it was a real physical test for them. So I think they can take a lot out of that, and to get 2 wins against 2 very, very strong sides. Scarlets had all their Welsh internationals the week before, and like I said, Edinburgh had a full team that went to Thomond Park on Saturday night. So to grind out a win like that can help a lot.
What about the halfback partnership?
Yeah, they were very good. I think, Craig Casey got a bit of criticism last week, as I said, and things didn't go his way against the Scarlets, but he was brilliant the other night. Liam Tolan gave him man of the match, and he was probably the standout player, and deservedly so. His natural instinct is to run and play and just move and bounce around the place, and obviously you have to have your the fundamental part of your game, your kicking and your passing has to be accurate. And I thought he did that really well the other night, and under a lot of pressure. So he would have learned a lot from probably being a little bit lethargic, getting the ball out of the breakdown the week before, and he was superb the other night. I think he's gnarly and in your face, confrontational, and he has a real kind of attitude about him, which is exactly what you want from a scrum half. And his performance was superb. I'm not. I think because it was the strength of the side they were playing against, probably. That's why Ben Healy was left on. He played very, very well. Super performance. The kicking again was outstanding, and some of his general play was, you could see the confidence kind of oozing out of him. He took on a few balls and ran at the line, and I thought he was brilliant. The opportunity to bring Jack Crowley on was probably the right decision not to bring him on, probably in a game like that. Hopefully he'll get game time in the next few weeks, but it was a very, very positive performance by both those guys who were under immense pressure from seasoned internationals.
Sticking with the scrum half position, Cooney obviously dropped by Ireland for this forthcoming period of matches, and responded publicly by going out on Twitter and saying that I'm going to butcher this quote, but essentially sport is this thing which frustrates you and then also gives you the opportunity to redeem yourself really quickly. And he certainly felt like he had redeemed himself at the weekend in some way. And again, you think about the career that he's had to get to the point where he is now. It's been full of setbacks. It's been a circuitous route to get to the point where he was even in the mix for being Ireland's #1 scrum half at the Six Nations, as it would have been played in February and March. And it's a good sign, I think, that he hasn't wilted under the pressure of being dropped.
Yeah, it's a sign of character. I think he's 30 now. He's not a young fella anymore, and I could write a book on the ups and downs and the injuries and the disappointments and the setbacks. And like I say, I looked at some of my teammates over the years with envy when they never got injured, never got dropped. Some of it is self-inflicted, of course, because if you don't play well, or the coach doesn't fancy what you're doing at that particular time, it's just part and parcel of it. And the fellas who don't get dropped obviously perform well, and but you can have a bitterness in your as well as a sports person. In any sport, you can be bitter and think that the odds are stacked against you, and you do X amount of things right, and then you're on an upward trajectory, and then suddenly it gets swept away from you. Where probably more seasoned internationals and guys who have big reputations, they're given more leeway around poor performances, if you like, at times. And that's just the nature of it when you're kind of chomping to try and get up. And you mentioned Larmour getting into a team, staying there. Perception is everything, and perception sometimes can be swayed with coaches as well. So he's had to deal with a tough week, considering the argument was there that he should have started in the Six Nations this year, and then he finds himself not in the squad. So it was nice to see him put out his feelings and comments. We don't see a lot of that from sports people. We sometimes see people, putting up a tweet, venting their frustration, and then deleting it when it's not when they get advised that it's not a good idea. But it was a tough week for him. The only thing you can do, and I'd say this to any young player, anyone trying to stay at the coalface and trying to keep banging at the door, is things can change very quickly. You can have an injury or two, and suddenly you can be propelled onto the bench for Ireland. He could be, and then he might end up getting, onto the team, and one good performance changes everything. So you got to keep going, and he's got to be resilient around that. But it's a tough week for him. And as I said, I know all about those ups and downs. But John Cooney is a very good player, and I thought he responded really well with a really good performance, and in Ulster's very, very good win away at Ospreys on Friday.
Are you kind of happy when you look back in your career that the majority of it didn't coincide with social media? Do you think you would have been one of those people on Twitter immediately after a game raging about your performance or a team's performance? Well,
I don't know if I'd be raging, but I'd probably be looking at comments and look, it's hard to kind of avoid them, because if you avoid social media, someone will invariably tell you, one of your mates or friends or something like that. So it's totally different for these guys, and it's a different world nowadays, Owen, which is tough to deal with, because there's so much scrutiny and pressure, and everybody has an opinion. Some of those opinions are very, very relevant, because they're fans who pay to go and watch games, and they're entitled to their opinions, and some of them make sense, and you've got to take the good with the bad. Then there's a lot of rubbish that's put up, people who don't understand what it's like, and the commitments and the sacrifices, and maybe the finer details of, for example, like obviously I made the point there about Munster last weekend, where there was so much stuff on social media about how much they kicked the ball and their game plan. And then you actually go back and look at the 4 games, and they kicked the ball the least amount, probably had the worst conditions of the 4 games that weekend. And so sometimes there's inaccuracies there, and that would frustrate you. And as a player, as a coach, if there's facts and truths there, you deal with them. So I'm glad, in a way, that definitely that wasn't there. Even for players after matches now, you can go in. You when I played, you could, by and large, go out and about, and you'd end up chatting to people or getting a photo or two here and there. But now people, are everywhere, and social media dictates the whole flow of their night sometimes when they're out and about. But it's part and parcel of it. Players got to focus, and you've always heard players say, "Well, I don't read the papers." Well, most of them do. They're telling fibs there, or else they hear about it. We all like to hear nice things said about ourselves, but it's a different world now, for sure.
Is it actually one of the strange elements of what's happened over the last little while as well, that players can play their game and they won't see people on the street? They won't have a crowd at their back if they're putting in a bad performance. Like, I'm not sure if Irish rugby crowds are like that anyway, where they can get on your back and they can get under your skin a little bit. But if they do, then I guess this is one of the positives of what's happening right now, is that in empty stadiums you can grow at your own pace.
Yeah, I like, to be honest, son, I preferred meeting people. When you go out and about. When I lived in Limerick and I went to the supermarket, and particularly in Limerick, everybody is very much into the rugby. The vast majority of people, they know what happened at the weekend. They feel they're close to the team. They have a connection there, and you meet people who would say stuff to you, like not insult you, but say, it was a terrible performance at the weekend, and this should be changed, and that should be changed, and the coach got this wrong. And I kind of used to enjoy that, and having, I wouldn't say debates with people, but chats with people about it. Whereas, so I wouldn't have any issue about, meeting people and that being a big positive, because it is a different world now. Because if any of these guys kind of walk out and about, there's a different probably element to what's to the way people approach them. Listen, 95, 90 8% of people are very good, and they support people when they have good days and bad days in sport. So, but the social media side of things is quite dangerous, I think, because if you read too much into that, it can affect confidence and self-belief, and you need all those things to kind of deal with the ups and downs and perform again.
Can we talk briefly about Ulster and Henderson's red card? Was there anything in that? Does he need to be worried? Is there any possibility he might miss some game time?
Yeah, he unfortunately, I think he may get a ban. I think it's harsh. I think this letter to law statement that you hear a lot, and contact with someone's face or neck area with your shoulder is a red card. So I think it was a red card. I would probably argue that it's sufficient punishment, because it was literally only a quick lunge and back. He didn't run in and charge in from 10 yards out. But, he could get a couple of weeks for that, and that would be bad news for Andy Farrell, bad news for Iain Henderson himself. I think it was a clumsy, kind of silly thing to do. We see lots of players now off static rucks when they're slow, that they're trying to counter attack, and they're trying to drop in a shoulder, bounce back out, which is sometimes is a waste of time. Other times it unsettles the scrum half a little bit if you can get a little bit of an impact in there and shift a player. But Dan Evans was standing quite upright, and Iain Henderson just decides to check in with the shoulder and clips the neck face area, and it's a red card. So I'd worry a little bit about it. There was very little impact in it, but I have to be honest, it's one that could get a ban. I probably would say it doesn't deserve a ban, that the red card would be sufficient, but I'd worry about it.
How did Ulster play apart from that?
They played well, I think. Ospreys had a very good win the week before against Edinburgh, which, they had a dreadful time last year, the Ospreys. In the last couple of seasons, they've been really poor. There's a little bit more optimism there, and Ulster started well, and they produced a real gritty performance. And look, they weren't physically tested like they probably will be by other teams in the league. Ospreys have lost a little bit of that physical power, but it was a good performance from Ulster. And when you go away on the road and win these games, it's a big positive. So a very decent performance from them.
And it looked like a scene from the past, but there were 31,000 people watching a live rugby match on Saturday between New Zealand and Australia. A little missive from a different part of the world and from another world, really.
It's phenomenal. I watched it with envy, and any rugby people that watched it, I think you're going, God, I just love to be seated in the crowd or at the match. It was a fascinating game. The first of these Bledisloe games, they're going to play each other 4 times. And Australia, I suppose, under Dave Rennie, have been, very, very disjointed. They've lost a few players overseas, and they've a couple of new caps, new players in the squad, and New Zealand, a couple of new players as well. And you think maybe just before half time, Rieko Ioane drops the ball going over the line, and you think that'll propel him on to a convincing win. But Australia were brilliant in the second half, and it was an incredible finish. There was 10 minutes of extra time after the hooter went, and Reece Hodge had a penalty to win it for Australia right at the death and injury time. Hits the crossbar inside his own half, and would have been an unbelievable win for them. But it was a brilliant game and a brilliant finish as well. It finished 16 all draw.
Last thing then, the Ireland squad, obviously 2 weeks from... It's 2 weeks. It's match week in 2 weeks, and then it's match week in 3 weeks. When you're looking at these games now, is there anything the players can do to actually get in the team, or because of who shows up fit, do you think that the management have a fair idea of what their starting 15 and matchday 23s are going to be?
I think they have a fair idea. They have a camp this week, and they'll meet up next Sunday then and go into the week prep for the Italian game, which is the week after. So, and then they've got France. So it'll be they haven't much time left. They won't play next weekend, the internationals. So some of them will be probably released back from the wider squad, maybe at the weekend. But he's a few headaches there with the injuries. Finlay Bealham, Dave Heffernan went off with head injuries. assessment, so they'll probably be okay. Keith Earls being out is tricky now with that full back situation, whether Hugo Keenan or does Shane Daly go in there. Maybe they play Stockdale and put Keenan on the wing. Who knows? But I think he has a fair idea who he's going to play and who he needs to play at this stage. I suppose the issue will around Henderson, if he receives a ban or not, will dictate whether Ryan Baird will play. As I said to you last week, I'd still play Ryan Baird. I'd start him. I'd give him the opportunity. Tyke Furlong is going to be a loss for the next couple of weeks. So we're a little bit short in the front row stakes, and that would be a concern going forward. But I think he knows he will be pretty close to knowing he's 23 at this stage.
All right, Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Cheers, lads.
It's 19 minutes past 9 here on OTB AM. We've got plenty still to come across this hour. Kieran Donaghy's going to join us. We'll talk NBA. The Lakers and LeBron have won in 6 games. Jim McGuinness at Galway, obviously, we'll talk to him about that. Colin Boogie is going to talk Roland Garros and a 20th Grand Slam title for Rafa Nadal. Plus, we've got our Gillette pressure rankings right after this.